Coming up on the Booth Review, we will discuss Jayden Daniels not returning in the Vikings game.
We talk about what this team has to do to get back on track.
And football players play football.
And broadcasters broadcast games. It's all coming up next on the Booth Review. Welcome into the latest edition of the Booth Review podcast. I'm Bram Weinstein with London Fletcher and Logan Paulsen. We're brought to you by Microsoft Surface Copilot Plus PC. And we are, or at least Logan and I, are in the BigBear.ai Command Center studio after a rough loss to Minnesota, team's 8th straight. They fall to 3-10, 31-0. Considering the gang was back together on offense, I don't think any of us could have seen this coming. So let's start at the end, which is this was a surprise. What now, London?
Man, what now? You gotta take a very hard look at everything that led to you performing like that as a team, offensively, defensively. Special teams really wasn't much of a factor in the ball game because it's not like we tried to kick any field goals. And I mean, they had one big return on the kickoff return for Minnesota, but other than that, it was from an offensive standpoint and defensive standpoint, just a all-around poor performance. So you dig into that, find out what were the reasons that you played like that, especially considering how you had played in the previous 2 ball games against the Dolphins in Madrid and also against the Broncos at home. A lot more competitive games, ended up losing both those games in overtime. So what's the reason why all of a sudden we regressed? As Dan Quinn said, took 3 steps backwards. What was the reason for that?
Yeah, I definitely felt that way. And this one feels kind of overwhelming for me personally because I think there was a lot of things that offensively and defensively didn't go well. And I think, Fletch, you alluded to some of those things there, right? You know, something like you're like, oh, you know, was the offensive plan where it needed to be for the pressure that Minnesota was going to bring? Defensively, it seemed like Kevin O'Connell had a really good beat on kind of how to get the defense into certain looks and certain positions, which is tough, right? Because it means you've kind of shown something and people have now found a thread they can pull on. So I think that's one thing, you know, like going back and watching the film, I wasn't like the effort necessarily was terrible, which I think is something that initially I was worried about. You know, I thought the guys on defense were playing hard, relatively speaking, but it's one of those games that kind of takes you back to the games earlier this season, you know, with the 20-point losses to Seattle, to Detroit, where it's like, man, where do you go from here? And like Fletch said, it's just like you got to be really, really, really critical in the evaluation of what you've done offensively and defensively. Everybody's got to kind of point to themselves and say, what can I do better? Because, you know, there's times where, you know, maybe the offensive line doesn't pick something up, or the quarterback vacates a pocket too quickly, or the call is not where it should be offensively, right? And it's the same thing on defense. It's really everybody's effort and everybody's mistakes contribute to this result. So really just being hypercritical of your own performance is the only way that I know how to handle this moving forward.
I mean, for me, the game flipped early. They scored on their opening drive. Washington goes down the field. 15-play drive, stalls inside the 2-yard line, 3 straight pass plays. We can go through some of the choices there in a little bit. And it wasn't just the stop there, London. It was a 98-yard drive that followed by an offense that hadn't scored a touchdown in 3 weeks and had already put one on the board and ran off nearly a quarter doing it. Yeah. So, like, to Logan's point, this is both sides here. Like, the defense needed to step up and make a stop and get the ball back for the offense. The offense obviously needed to execute at the end of a drive because the margin for error for them has been so thin. And that to me was, I know what the score looks like, but that to me was everything you needed to know about where the ball game was.
Yeah, it's a great momentum shift. You know, you get down there, you mentioned getting inside the 2-yard line and not coming away with points. But then from to add insult to injury, now you allow them to go 19 plays and 98 yards and get a touchdown. So not only are you kind of still reeling about not getting points in that red zone situation, but then to allow them to drive down there like that. And it was a situation where it boiled down to third downs from a defensive standpoint, not being able to get stops on third down. And it wasn't like these were 3rd and 2 situations, 3rd and 1s, 3rd and 3s. They had, I think, like 3rd and 6s, 3rd and, I think, maybe a 3rd and 12.
Yeah.
There were some 3rd and longer situations that they were able to convert on. And this was a offense that came into that ball game 31st rank on third downs, and you allowed them to convert it. And a lot of that was our inability to get pressure on the quarterback. They wanted to play a lot of zone coverages, DQ did, just kind of keeping everything in front of him. He talked about not wanting to allow these receivers, because they have, when you look at Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson, those guys are two elite receivers, and you don't want to necessarily play a lot of man coverage against these guys. So you want to say, hey, we'll play a lot of zone coverage. But if you're going to play zone, you have to figure out ways to get pressure on the quarterback, and we didn't do that. We ended with 4 sacks, but those sacks weren't impactful sacks. They were kind of just, a 0-yard sack here, a -3-yard sack. They weren't impactful type of sacks. And our inability to get pressure on a quarterback is what really led to all the issues that we had defensively in that ball game.
Yeah, no, I think I totally agree with that. To me, it comes back down to the third downs 100%. Because like when you're watching the tape, I'm sure you watch it back maybe this morning or last night, Fletch. Like there's moments you're like, oh, that's a nice run fit, or there's a good win in a 1-on-1 situation, or that's a nice line stunt, and we're in 2nd and 8. Oh, here's 3rd and 10, and then all of a sudden, JJ McCarthy scrambles for a first down. Then he hits that big corner for a first down. Then they hit that middle screen for a first down. And those were not, again, like you're saying, those were not like easy first downs to get. It was 3rd and 10, 3rd and 11, 3rd and 8. And those are opportunities for the defense to get off the field. And I think like when you look at the 1st and 2nd down effort to get to those opportunities, it's great. But again, I forget what the conversion percentage was, but at one point it was like they were 7 for 8 on 3rd down, and they were long plus down in distances. And so to me, like that's the narrative. You don't go on a 19-play drive without executing great on 3rd down. Like really you don't. And there was enough good stuff on 1st and 2nd down to be like, man, they should be in a better position here. And they just weren't able to capitalize. And so some of it is, I think, to Fletcher's point, the lack of pressure with 4. Also, I felt like J.J. McCarthy, the Minnesota coaching staff, had a really good feel for kind of the rhythms and situations of the play call. So like, hey, on 3rd and 10, we're going to be in Tampa 2, or we're going to be in quarters. And these are some route concepts that we feel really good about to beat those looks, right? And so even the screen I thought was really well called and really well timed, because again, they're kind of right around that 25, 27-yard line. They're bringing a little bit of pressure. They throw the screen right into the pressure, ends up being a big play. So just in terms of feel, I thought Minnesota had a really good feel, and they put JJ in a good spot to be successful. And again, so it was kind of a combination of things. It wasn't just, hey, the four-man rush was a huge variable, obviously, Fletch, but I also felt like Minnesota had it really locked in terms of when and how they would be calling certain coverages specifically.
Yeah, I'm looking at the play-by-play, and Minnesota converted a 3rd and 6 on the 19-play drive. They converted a 3rd and 6. They converted a 3rd and 9 for 12 yards. They got 12 yards. They converted a 3rd and 8, a 21-yard pass, and again, and they converted a 3rd and 12.
Yeah,
so
it was the last one, right? The one JJ.
Yeah. So these are issues that you want to get in. If you can get a team into, I'd say 3rd and 7 pluses, that's when you really can rush the quarterback. Now the 3rd and 5s or less is kind of like, okay, we're gonna probably play it man to man. They're easier to convert. The first one where they sent it was a 4-man rush. They sent Quan off the edge, and their fullback just saw him at the last minute, and he's able to knock Quan off of probably would have been a safety on McCarthy. And that was the one time where I felt like, okay, we got a little bit of pressure, so to speak, on him. But beyond that, and besides that, McCarthy was very comfortable in the pocket. He was able, when he didn't get the sack by Quan, he scrambled for the first down on that one. But, it was just a situation where they were able to make plays, especially in the pass game, not enough pressure. And that's why, at some point you're thinking, all right, DQ, the 4-man rush is not working, especially on 3rd downs. Maybe we need to go to a different type of plan to get pressure on this quarterback, to get him out of rhythm, because you got a quarterback who was struggling coming into the ball game. He had thrown 10 interceptions. He was completing like 54% of his passes. When you allow him to get comfortable and get confidence, now he's like, oh, this is easy. He's throwing on time to go into his first read, maybe get into a second read here and there, but you never truly got him off his spot, make him feel uncomfortable, speed up his process like you saw the Vikings did us. They sped up the quarterback's process. They also manipulated the pass protection of our offense to where you would have free runners coming at Jayden or at Marcus and things like that. So, it was a situation where maybe we needed to make a little bit more adjustments in the pass rush because the plan wasn't working just with the 4-man rush.
Yeah, I also think another huge variable to consider here is the game flow, right? So one of the things about some of the things you're describing with J.J. McCarthy is when they get down, the Minnesota Vikings, he's got to throw more. They've got to be more aggressive down the field. And here, because the offense wasn't able to be effective versus the defense, they're able to kind of sit in this perfect world of like, hey, we're going to run the ball. Here's a little play action boot. Here's a really easy kind of 2-man concept that I'm reading a high-low on. And I felt like he wasn't stressed partially because there was no reason to stress him. Kevin O'Connell, I thought, called a great game from this standpoint where it's like, hey, he can make plays when he has to make plays, but we're going to limit those opportunities. And in terms of limiting the exposure of the quarterback, I thought Kevin O'Connell did a great job of that, right? It's like, they weren't afraid to punt in the second half. They weren't afraid to do all these things to kind of manage his risk. And I think that was another reason why you see a much more effective J.J. McCarthy than we've seen. Like, I think it's really telling that they came out, took the ball with the opening kickoff, right?
Yeah.
They go down. They obviously had a really good plan. The way they used 12, the way they used 13 personnel to get the Washington Commanders in a base defense, get them in a simple coverage structures and let J.J. kind of pick you apart. They go down and score. I think they had a ton of confidence that they were going to have that the Minnesota defense was going to have good success against the Washington offense. And that ended up being true. And obviously we got to talk about the goal, the 4th and goal that they didn't get and all those kind of things. But I think, like, to me, it just showed they got in the game flow they wanted and then they never got out of it. And it really helped J.J. McCarthy be super effective.
I mean, the whole week, they were honest about what was going on. McCarthy had only played in half of their games. His completion percentage was amongst the lowest of starting quarterbacks. His passer rating was literally the lowest. You cited the interception. So he was struggling. The best way to put it was he was struggling. They had talked openly about how they had stripped down their offense. They were running the ball. It must have been 80% of the time on first down, trying to get positive yardage, trying to get manageable down and distances for them, whoever their quarterback was. They've had this issue this entire year. So I need you to help me with something, both of you, okay? Because it read like, I get that this team is missing their defensive ends. And they're missing some corners now, too. So some of their best cover players aren't out there. And I full respect to those outside weapons that they have. Jefferson is as elite gets in the NFL. Addison's great, too. But this read like, don't you have to take a chance and bring more pressure to try to get this guy out of rhythm and induce mistakes? Can you help me understand the balance of the risk of bringing pressure with weapons like that versus the idea of we kind of just have to do it because we have to disrupt this player?
Well, I think what the plan was, just based on how DQ and the defensive staff, how they called the game, they're saying, hey, we know when we're going to keep everything in front of us. We're going to, just rush 4, play a lot of zone coverage, whether it be cover 2, cover 3, maybe a little bit of cover 6, which is still a little bit of man and zone coverage. Keep everything in front of us, and hopefully there are times where we'll win our one-on-ones, or we'll confuse them with our disguises and force JJ to hold on to the football a little bit longer. Maybe we can force a couple incompletions, maybe force him to throw an interception, or just get him off of rhythm or allow the pass rush to get there. The flip side of it is they weren't getting there with the 4-man rush. So if you all of a sudden say, we're going to bring an extra rusher, a 5th guy, now you open yourself up to, are we going to play man-to-man on the back end? And if you play man-to-man and you expose yourself to explosive plays where if they block it up and you get one-on-ones against an Addison or a Justin Jefferson, those guys can now all of a sudden hit you for 60, 70-yard touchdown plays. That's the type of ability they have. So it was, hey, let's make them dink and dunk down the field, and then we'll play great red zone defense, which defensively we have been playing great red zone defense the prior 2 ball games. I think we had held Miami and Denver to 4 out of 10 in the red zone.
Yeah.
So that was the plan. Yesterday, we didn't play great red zone defense. So we allowed them to get in the red zone, but then we didn't stop them once they got into those situations. Minnesota was able to capitalize in the red zone, and they finished 4 for 4 in the red zone. So that was the other issue. Poor third down defense and poor in the red zone. That was the big issues with the defense.
Yeah, and going back to the pressure thing, I think also like prior to this week, I would have thought that you could get pressure with 4. Even with our kind of depleted 4, when you look at the different combinations that they've had in there, Minnesota, like you've seen teams kind of get after them a little bit.
This was actually the healthiest their offensive line had been basically all year.
Yeah, and I do think that is something I know I undervalued coming into this game in terms of like how important that would be for him. Because again, it allowed JJ, like you guys mentioned on the broadcast, like to just sit in there, confidently see throws in a way that he hadn't really had the opportunity this entire year. You look at old games of this offense, and he is under siege all the time. Long developing concepts, play action passes, anything that's down the field past 10 yards, teams are getting pressure. Like the Bears, who have like kind of this much maligned pass rush, were able to get consistent pressure against them because like Fletcher was saying, or you were saying, he holds the football, he's kind of waiting to see stuff, and they're able to get the pressure there. Here, again, with that healthy group back in there, Darrisaw's back, Jackson was back, their 2 starting left side players were in there. Like their right guard, I think, was nicked up. He was back in the lineup. Like it was a drastic difference in performance for that group. And so I do think that was something that needs to be considered here. But I do also agree with Fletch, like that on the broadcast, he said a bunch about like maybe it's time to throw in a pressure. And there are ways to get pressure without bringing extra people, like simulated pressures. Like you can kind of stack the front in a way where you kind of force them to target their protection in a specific way, and you can bring free runners to the other side. So I think there's some of that maybe they could have done because
Minnesota did a lot. Like Minnesota did a lot of the simulated pressure.
And that's what they major in Minnesota. That's what they're really good at. And so I think maybe there was opportunities for more of that, just to kind of make it where it's less like these 4 guys are rushing, these 7 guys are in coverage, and just provide a little bit of consternation maybe to the quarterback. I could see that being an argument. But in terms of playing more man coverage, I'm not sure that I would feel comfortable playing more man coverage with this secondary group as it currently exists. Fletch, maybe you disagree.
And also, you can have, and I don't know how much in our menu we have, what you would kind of consider fire zones.
Yeah.
You're rushing 5 and still playing maybe 3 underneath and 3 deep. So you still are playing kind of a safer coverage, so to speak, and you play the zones underneath. So I don't know how much we have that in our menu now within the defensive play sheet. So, maybe that's something they'll look at moving forward. Like, hey, okay, we can, if we're not going to get consistent pressure with the 4-man rush, we can bring 5, but still play what we call zone 3 underneath, 3 deep type of coverages and things like that. So as I'm sure they're going to take a hard look at what can we do differently. And then there are going to have to be some times where you just have to say, hey, we're going to go out and you guys got to hold up for maybe 2 seconds as a corner or 3, because we're not going to allow him to sit back here and just hold on to this football. We're going to bring all our pressure. And then you may be exposed a little bit, but you got to be able to cover for 2 seconds, 2.5 seconds, and hopefully that quarterback will be getting hit or getting sacked.
This reminded me a little bit of the game earlier in the season against Atlanta, where they had come off a really rough performance against Carolina. Mm-hmm. And if you watched Michael Penix in that game, he was apt to make mistakes. He was under pressure consistently. Washington didn't bring a lot of pressure on him. Suddenly he got really comfortable, and everybody had a big game. In this particular case, if you told me Sunday morning that Justin Jefferson's going to have 2 catches for 11 yards, but the team would lose 31-0, I wouldn't have believed you. Because at least in this case, there were some of the star players that were not taking advantage of them, but it wasn't enough. And this did feel like, is there a balance here where, okay, we're going to put people at risk. Every defense is going to have a liability, but we're doing it because we think we need to disrupt this player more than other quarterbacks in general because he has struggled in the past, and they just weren't able to get any kind of real pressure on him. All of a sudden, here's a guy who, if you watched him, you go, where's his confidence level? Well, he had it yesterday against them.
And again, like it's really easy to go back and like, let's play Monday morning
That's right.
quarterback against
Of course.
this. Like, and so, I was like, I don't think McCarthy's playing as bad as people think. He was still playing bad football. So to me, playing a lot of zone versus him seemed like 100% the right thing to do because of his ability to just kind of fall into mistakes. Like, why would I stress myself defensively by bringing pressure, putting our corners on islands when he, like Fletcher said, has thrown 10 interceptions this year, and he's made a bunch of errant throws. He has one of the lowest passer ratings in the NFL. Like, there are reasons for that. Let's let him do his thing and give us an opportunity. And that's where I go back to the game flow thing. Like, he was never at any point in a high stress environment because he never had to throw, right? In the 2-minute situation, they're taking a knee. You know what I mean? Like, because they understand that their defense is in a good spot to contain Washington's offense. So I look at that and I say, again, like, we could talk about pressure, lack thereof. I don't know if I would have done anything different going into the game, Fletch, because of how poorly he had been playing.
No, not going into the game, because as I looked at McCarthy, the thing that I saw out zone coverage was what I would have played against him.
Yeah, because I felt like he did pretty good versus man. Like, he can see man, he can make throws. Like,
with young quarterbacks, especially man to man, hey, I can go to this guy in a one-on-one situation. Like, it's easy, especially against pressure. All right, they're blitzing me. I'm going to go to Justin Jefferson, give him a chance, and maybe it's a 50-50 ball. So, okay, the zone concept, playing zone against him was the absolute right thing going into that game. However, once you saw the game flow, you saw how they were able to just pick us apart, especially in the first sequence, first defensive standpoint. Okay, they scored to start the game. But it was that 98-yard drive where you're like, all right, especially it's 19 plays. So at some point do you say, all right, man, let me just throw in a heater right here. And DQ did dial up a couple pressure. I don't know if I can't remember if it was later on after that 19 play drive or doing it, but it just was by that time he had already kind of started to get into a flow. But another part which we need to touch on, complementary football. We did not play complementary football. The offense didn't do their part. So maybe we get into a situation where it's a kind of a mid-20s type game by both teams, where the offense is moving the ball, getting points. Defensively, hey, they're moving the ball. Maybe we're holding to a field goal in a couple situations. So you keep the score down a little bit. And we're not here talking about a 31-0 game. We're talking about a close ball game like we had against the Broncos, maybe with scores in the mid-20s by both teams, and it comes down to a field goal here or there and stuff like that. But this just wasn't complimentary football, and that's the thing that's probably most disappointing too. The fact that we didn't play our style of ball.
Yeah, and Fletcher, I had a quick question for you. So, like, I know on offense, for example, like, sometimes, like, you get got because of game plan. Like, you can't just go on the sideline and just add a bunch of formations or add a bunch of calls because it's not on the call sheet. The communication hasn't been established for the offense. How hard or how easy would it be? Let's say you went into the game plan being like, hey, we're going to be predominantly zone. We've got 3 or 4 pressures that we like in key moments. How hard would it be to be like, hey, we're going to add these pressures in for a defense? I know offensively it can be really challenging to add protections and route concepts in on the sideline or even a run scheme because you haven't repped it in the week. But how hard would that be for them to be like, hey, our game plan is this sheet, but maybe we didn't anticipate X, and so now we're going to add in pressures or more coverages or whatever it looks like.
You're going to go into the game with maybe 4 or 5 pressures regardless. If you obviously in the beginning of the season, they had a higher volume of pressures that you go into the game plan with. So we got these different things we practice throughout the course of the week, and we'll get to some of our pressures. I can remember when I was with some of the other guys, whether it was Greg Williams, Dick LeBeau, who was with us in Buffalo, or even Jim Haslett, we would have a ton of pressure that we wouldn't even get to in the ball game because we got so many of them that we never even got to all the pressure down the call sheet. But it would have been easy to maybe and it's not something unique. Maybe you dial up that Quan Martin pressure a few more times. They sent Bobby. Bobby almost had a sack. So don't call those plays a couple more times. Like if you look at Minnesota, that cross pick stunt that they ran, I don't know how many times they ran in the game. It felt like about 10, but they kept running the same type of play, and they're playing cover 2 behind it, and they're constantly getting pressure with that, and it's not something exotic and things like that. So there was something you just may have to keep calling the same type of pressures. Maybe you got 2 or 3 and it can even be a simulated pressure where you're just figuring out ways you're creating a way to get a free rusher to the quarterback.
All right, let's switch over to the offense and let's focus on Jayden here. We're taping this before Dan Quinn talks today. Last night, there was no information that there was any re-injury or different injury that occurred last night, but let's wait and see what everyone says today about it. They said last night he could have gone back into the game. They chose not to. At the point he would have come back in, it would have been 17-0 at that point. And he had just come off what was the opening drive of the second half that ended with a 4th down interception by Andrew Van Ginkel that led to a field goal. So he could have come back in the third quarter at 17-0. What's just your general takeaway here of the decision to not have him go back into the game?
We were talking about this a little bit before the show started, Fletch, before you got on. And one thing that I forgot to mention is like when I'm on the sideline, I get a pretty intimate reaction to like the injury because I'm like literally standing right behind the bench. And so at the time, like I understand they said he could have gone back in just from his body language, the body language of the trainer, the way they handled him going into the tent, coming out of the tent and the conversation around it. It definitely felt, like a not an insignificant thing. And so maybe he could have gone back in, if it was like gun to your head, go back in the game. But I also wonder like the severity of the aggravation. I'm not saying even re-injured. You know what I'm saying? So like it on the sideline, it seemed much more emotional than, we get to talk to Dan afterwards. That seemed like a very controlled kind of setting. So again, that's something I just wanted to bring up. Being on the sideline, you hear those interactions and you're like, man, maybe this is a little bit more
I think
serious.
it's important here because all you're hearing is what's messaged. And the message is in the third quarter of a 17-0 game, the starting quarterback is not going back into the game. Now, we know that he's had, a recent injury, and clearly it was aggravated in some way, but there was no injury designation that was given at that point. So I appreciate the clarification of what you got to see down there.
It was,
because it's all we're hearing is what the message is of what was happening, and it is a bit confusing, honestly.
Yeah, and go ahead, Fletch.
Go ahead, because as I said on the broadcast, where I thought it might be a situation where potentially where DQ and medical staff was saying, hey, he aggravated it. It's not worth putting him back in this ball game. We can't protect him in this offense from an offensive standpoint. They've had multiple times where they got free runners. Our defense is not slowing down Minnesota. It's just a situation where risk reward, maybe you're even thinking about the game against the Seahawks where he got injured and you're saying, you know what, I'm not going to expose him to a permanent injury to where he's not able to play next week. He can go back into this ball game. But I think just when you look at the Florida game, Jayden at that point was 9 for 20. The offense, with the exception of the opening drive, it was kind of clunky, not really being able to get a lot established in the passing game. Now the run game was working. Yeah. And we can touch on that. But just the way it was going, like I'm not going to put him out there. He gets injured. We can't protect him against this blitz happy defense. That's what they do. We'll live to fight another day and get him out of here and hopefully it's just a little swelling or a little irritation and he's ready to go next week against the New York Giants.
Yeah, and it kind of reminded me of something when I was in Atlanta, right? I had a really bad MCL tear with some damage in the ankle ligament also, like someone had fallen on me. And I could go back in the game, and I did go back in the game, but upon watching film, I probably should not have gone back in the game. Does that make sense? Like, so there are these moments where you can, it doesn't mean you should. And I think Fletch did a great job there of providing some context. Like, he was emotional on the sideline. Like his mom sits in the front row and she's trying to talk to him and he's trying to talk to her. And there was some the best way I can explain it is just consternation about the moment, right? About the level of the injury. And I think to myself, like, with the way Fletch is describing how the offense was performing, I think he's 100% spot on. Like, when you're having a hard time protecting a young player, he's a competitor. He's trying to put everything on the line. Like, I remember there's a couple times where he's scrambling and he's taking some shots where I was like, man, already we're doing that. But that's what this Minnesota defense does. So I do think that context is important. And also,
this wasn't out of character for them, though. They do this every game.
Right? And we're going to talk about maybe that more in a second.
Yeah.
But like, I do think that I think there was, at the moment, with the game flow being at what it was, and me seeing again the kind of the tumult, like the energy on the sideline around the injury, like it kind of made sense in the moment to me. And again, like Dan will talk today, we'll get more information. But
I do want to just say one other thing about it, and not to be contrarian about it.
No.
But it's the score is only 17-0 when he could have gone back in. To me, in the third quarter, the game's not over. Now, you may want to characterize it that way, and it wasn't going well, obviously, for them. But, like, to me, that score is not the Seattle game where they were down 30 with 8 minutes to go. And honestly, like, that was a fluke, that injury that he got in that Seattle game. But, like, that game was over against Seattle. This one, to me, at 17-0, isn't. Like, so I just wanted to say that.
No, it's important to say that. And it's really good context. But I also think Fletch brought up a really good point, because I think when Dan's calling defensive plays, he has a very unique perspective on the defense. And if you feel like you can't stop them for whatever reason, and we've talked about why or not that is, I think it gives you a different feel of the pulse of the game. And so maybe he's feeling a little bit of consternation, a little bit of anxiety, and kind of like, we can't stop them, we can't protect. Why put him back into the fray here in this moment? And I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but it on the sideline, just watching, I don't know how it felt from the booth. It kind of felt that way to me, where even though the game was in hand, it felt like it was very close to being out of hand.
Yeah, I guess I'm just, I'm like everybody. I'm tunnel vision. Like, we can win. You can always feel like you can win.
But it reminds me of the Zach Ertz thing too. Like, we can win, but like, like you're exposing. Like, I feel so bad for Zach. Holy cow, man. Like, and I know the whole staff feels bad for him. The locker room was crazy afterwards with Zach, like, just the support for him. But like, that's the risk that you're exposing him to in a game that may or may not be in hand.
Yeah. Nah, Bram, that game was over. I mean, it was just from a standpoint of the way they were going to have to get back into it. It was going to have to be throwing the football. You're down. They're down. You say 17-0, but it probably felt like 35-0 at that point in time, because of how you were going to have to, just the game flow of moving the football against this defense of the Vikings. They were constantly getting guys in the face of Jayden Daniels.
Yes.
There was no reason to put him back in that ball game, because given the fact that this is a guy who's been injured multiple times in the season. He's missed multiple games, and we can't protect him against this blitz-happy defense of the Minnesota Vikings. We're not going to be able to get back in the game with Jayden without exposing him to more risk of injuries. Even if he doesn't get sacked, he's going to have to scramble. He's going to take more hits, and it just wasn't going to happen. And you have to have a feel for what's going on in that ball game. And that feel of that game yesterday at 17-0, like, you know what? This is just not our day. Let's get Mariota in here. He's played some good football for us. He may give us a spark and may get us back in the game, but I can't risk putting Jayden back in this game to get him injured. It's not worth it.
But I think you do bring up a good point, Bram, because when you said that to me earlier, I was like, it wasn't 17-0, but it was. Like, it was
14-0 when they had the interception. Yeah. It was 17-0 when he would have gone back out on the field and did not.
Yeah, and it felt different.
And it's the third quarter.
Yeah. But like, to me, like,
what happened the very next series after it was 17-0 when Mariota came in the game?
Yeah, interception, yeah.
Right, he threw an interception. Here's the other thing, just to say this. Because both of these teams had extraordinarily long drives. Like, they had a 19-play drive. They ran 12 minutes off the clock. Jayden only had 4 series up to this point. Yeah. And 2 of them were double-digit play drives, and one was aided by a couple of penalties that kept one going. That 4th down interception that was thrown, they were in the red zone. So they 2 out of the 4 drives, he had a 15-play, 83-yard drive that ended up with a turnover on downs and a 12-play, 58-yard drive with almost 7 minutes off the clock. 2 out of 4 drives, they moved the ball. It might not have been easy. That's for sure. Like, I totally agree with that. It wasn't easy. That's all I want to say about it. Like, they didn't have the ball a lot. They moved the ball twice successfully in the 4 drives they had, and they chose to go in this. Listen, I don't want him to get hurt either. I don't.
No.
He was 9 for 20 with an interception. He was 9 for 20.
Wasn't an interception overturned or a fumble was overturned earlier in that drive?
Yeah, because they had 12 men on the field.
Yeah.
He had got hit on that play and fumbled.
The teams that have success against the Vikings defense, all of them through the year, you have to run the ball successfully against them, or you're a sitting duck, because they come with blitzes more than anybody in the NFL. They're extremely successful at it. That score against Seattle was very deceiving. It was 26-0, but Sam Darnold threw for 90 yards in that game, and Jackson Smith and Jigba was a disappearing act because their pass defense is that kind of level of elite.
No, and I think it goes back to me, like the game flow thing. And then Fletch, I think you hit something like that. A lot of like hardcore, like you feel this, like obviously I'm an offensive coordinator in the high school level. You feel it in the high school game so much more acutely because teams run the ball more. The games are a little bit shorter.
Yeah.
And this kind of felt and played like a high school game from a time standpoint because of how long these drives were taking. And so the number of possessions required to come back and win this game was getting really tight there late in the game. But I also think it goes back to Minnesota taking the ball to start the game, because immediately you put our offense, Cliff Kingsbury, the play caller, in a situation where it's like, now I have to make up a possession, which is not necessarily true, but you feel that when you're calling plays. You feel that. I've been on offenses where really bright dudes, Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, really awesome offensive coordinators, like you can feel the urgency in the play call come in, and you're like, oh, okay. And again, that's what that does. And again, when the defense is playing as well as Minnesota's defense was, which we can talk about in more detail in a second, like it kind of has this overwhelming vibe, and I think it leads to some of these decisions when it comes to throwing the football.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, listen, I mean, he got injured earlier with that injury. Perceptually, it looks awful that he walks off the field with it. It's impossible not to have human nature to be thinking about that. Like during the course of the game. And, but that leads to what I think is the bigger question, which I think we all agree on, assuming he's healthy, because we don't know if it's just a re-aggravation, if he's fine, if there's anything new they have to talk about. You want him to continue playing, right?
I do.
Yeah.
1,000,000%. I know, like, this was good. This was going to be a tough game for him to come back anyway because of all the things we talked about with Minnesota. Like, if you look at games that he's struggled in historically, they've been teams like Minnesota that pressure this way, right? So this is going to be a tough game for him regardless. So I wanted him to play, though. I want him to get these reps. I want him to get these opportunities no matter who the opponent is. So, like, I'm not as worried about re-injury. I'm worried about developmental arc for him, which to me is the main thing almost for this football team over the last 5 weeks of the season.
Yeah, he needs reps. He just needs reps. As from a developmental standpoint, he's a young quarterback, second season in the NFL, who hasn't played a ton of games this year, and he hasn't played a ton of games. This was the third game this season where he had what you would consider his full complement of offensive weapons. So he needs more reps.
Okay, let me end where we started then. Take me into the locker room. This is obviously, listen, this is a long losing streak. Season is not going in any way, shape, or form that I even could have envisioned the way it would go. So how are the players thinking about the last 4 games, all division games?
Obviously, when you're in a division game, I think it kind of provides some level of motivation and some level of passion. But to me, like, I remember being in 2011, I think we were out of it early. In 2013, we were out of it early. When I was with the Bears in 2016, we were out of it early. When I was in San Francisco, we were out of it early. And really, it becomes like, this is going to sound bad, but it becomes like, I need to take care of my film so that I have a job next year, right? And like, every scout will tell you this. Every coach told me this, because again, I was an undrafted free agent like Fletch was, but it was like, they don't care about the season. They care about the last 3 games. They're going to go watch the last 3 games of football that you played. And they don't care about whether you're in the playoffs, out of the playoffs, division opponent. They want to see a guy go out there and compete. And so that was something that in those seasons that were really tumultuous and bad and emotional for different reasons. It was like, how do I handle my work the best I possibly can? And people say this all the time, but it's a professional sport for a reason. Yeah. And these are the games you get paid for, right? Everyone says you get paid for practice. I buck that. You get paid for Sunday, buck that too. It's when nobody wants to play football, you have to go play. That's why you're getting paid. And these are the games where you have to go out and put literally your best foot forward. No one's going to care. Like, you want to be an NFL football player. These are the games that create that, in my opinion, Fletch.
Well, and also you find out who are the guys that you want to have in the foxhole with you when you're going through adversity. Everybody wants to be with you, and when everything is going great and you're 10-3 at this point in the season, and man, we're going to the playoffs. We maybe compete for the division championship or win a division, maybe a first round home field a bye and all those types of things. But it's when adversity sets in. You're 3-10. You're coming off a 31-0 loss to the Minnesota Vikings. Who are the guys that you can lean on that's going to be a leader during the week leading up to this ball game? Because practice is important too, Logan. The meeting rooms, making sure you're not allowing conversations to happen that are divisive, because there's times where you're on a team and you're playing poorly, and you'll have these side conversations that continue that divides a team. You got to have some guys. Yeah, you got to have some guys in that locker room that cut that out. They're like, hey, no, we're not doing that here. We're going to turn this. They start a negative conversation. You swing it back to a positive conversation. And like Logan said, at the end of the day, you're also fighting for your own jobs, whether it be here or with another team. There are going to be guys who are free agents next year. I think, probably half the team is, or close to half the team will be free agents next year. Yep. So they're looking at the last 3 or 4 games of a season. And you really want to look at what a guy looks like when you're playing for nothing. Scores out of hand. Is he continuing to still play hard? Season's out of line. Season's out of hand. We're no longer making the playoff. Does he continue to show up in these tough moments? Because those are guys that eventually, when we get this ship back righted, those are the ones I want on my team.
Yeah, first matchup against Jackson Dart, too. We played Russell Wilson in week 1 with the Giants, so we'll get a chance to look at him now, future quarterbacking for the New York Giants. So it'll be interesting this weekend, and the division games are always interesting, no matter what the records are.
Yeah, they're always interesting, and again, to me, it's in some ways it's a blessing. This is going to sound crazy, maybe people don't play, but it's kind of a blessing to have another opportunity. To say, this isn't who we are. This Minnesota game is the exception rather than the rule, and we have more opportunities to fix it, right? Could you imagine if that was the last game you played of the season? That'd be so incredibly disheartening and frustrating. At least we got an opportunity to get it right. And I know it's tough and it's not right and all these things, but gosh, I would hate to end it. So going against a division opponent who we beat earlier this season. They aren't as diverse or as complicated as we've seen from Minnesota, for example. Seems like a good game to get. They're a good football team. I'm not going to say we're going to outright win this game, but it'll be a little bit easier and let everybody kind of get the return, get the band back together this week against the New York Giants. I think might be appropriate.
Yep. All right. We'll see what happens this weekend.
They've been playing competitive football, though, the Giants.
Yeah, very competitive, yeah.
Start at the quarterback spot. So, I'd say this, man, the coaches in games like this, seasons like this is where you really have to figure out ways to get your team ready to play against the Giants. And it's one thing, hey, division opponent, but you're going to need more than that to get these guys back ready to play, because, there's a lot of guys who are down after that performance yesterday against the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, it was a tough one, but they do get another opportunity next week up in New Jersey. We'll be there, and we'll have the booth review for you next Monday after the rematch with the New York Giants. We'll see you then. Booth Review was filmed at the BigBear.ai Command Center studio. BigBear.ai offers mission-ready AI for a rapidly evolving world, proudly protecting the Washington Commanders and its fans.